You know, I'm going to step back for a second. A lot of our listeners may not be aware of some of these terms. You know, they might not have been introduced to them. Explain push hand.
Mr. Wedlake, you're gonna.
I
think Mr. Wedlake should do that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mr.
you're the Tai Chi expert.
Let's go over to Lee. I'm sorry. Why don't you give us some help on that?
The Tai Chi push hands is a drill. It's a sensitivity drill that does exactly what Marty and Todd were saying. So it's done softly. When you get tensed up with movement, it makes it harder to detect certain motions. So by relaxing with it and going with the flow, you get a sense of what the possibilities are, of the potential of every single move. So it's a two-person drill, and it's done in a number of different ways, from single hand to two hands, and then it progresses into a fully combative free form sort of thing, which is where they have, you know, the national or world championships in China on that. And it includes arm breaking and throwing and all of that good stuff. But it's an excellent drill just to give somebody a sense of how to dissipate force. It's just how to dissolve away from energy.
Frank liked to dabble in sticky hands. Is it very similar to that?
No, it can be, but the thing, sorry, Mr. Wedlake, the push hands teaches you about resistance and about non-resistance. And it teaches you to understand the direction and the flow of the resistance, and resistance being them pushing on you and you moving and, like he said, melting away from that. Now you can use that to an extent in sticky hands. I've seen Mr. Trejo's sticky hands video, and Mr. Rainey taught and teaches and utilizes something called checking hands, where it's similar to sticky hands. Of late, he's gone a little more distance and a little more freestyle combatives, but I keep it at a close range and at a slower speed so that we can understand. And so we're working almost in a hubud fashion, back and forth. But then we open it up in checking hands so that it's basically a free for all. But it's not the same as push hands. Push hands is really about physically reading, like Mr. Zaninovich was saying, physically reading and feeling the resistance and how to absorb, dissolve, or identify, absorb, dissolve, or redirect. Am I correct, Mr. Wedlake?
Oh, yes. I mean, what the saying is, you redirect 1,000 pounds with 4 ounces. Just no force against force. You know, my take on the sticky hands is it's way more ballistic than push hands would be.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, because we get into the chi sao drills, and when we start doing that, you know, you'll start doing that flow and you'll feel it when it becomes explosive, and it will.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have anything similar in the Kenpo curriculum?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, we'll just go right down the line. Lee, what is your answer?
I talked with Mr. Parker about it, and he said our techniques are the sensitivity drills. And you get a sense of that when you see how we have so much, you know, the sliding checks and so on. And then you've got to go to the next phase, which is you need to break out of the what if and go, or out of idea and go to what if and say, well, he moved and he's doing this, and you pick it up from there. But you need to have this cooperative opposition to make this work. Otherwise, it just turns into somebody disengages and pops you, and then they laugh at you. So you don't get the opportunity to work with it. But yes, that's what he called our equivalent of the sticky hands or the flow drills.
Todd, your thoughts?
In the physical application of that may manifest itself in techniques such as repeating mace, where you're dropping back and you're redirecting here. It's a mild manifestation of the same idea. Some of the techniques that have maybe a double parry, where you're parrying and redirecting and utilizing the Venetian blind principle, as well as, you know, rotating with that, is a physical manifestation of the idea of that push hands, where you're redirecting that 4,000 pounds with 4 ounces.
Marty, do we have a problem with focusing too much on striking techniques and not more sensitivity drills?
Well, I tend to agree with Mr. Wedlake and Mr. Durgan. If we utilize the different levels of learning and practice with our techniques, we're going to get an example and a good learning foundational structure from doing it that way, from doing a Tai Chi style, like Mr. Wedlake said, and getting a feel of it. Being cooperative, because you don't want one guy turning around and said, "Oh, I could have hit you," and he hit you. That's not the drill. And that's not being cooperative at all. I mean, there's time and a place for all that. We get a technique line and you can raise it to whatever level you want. Do I think we punch and we kick too much? I like what we do. I think we do it well. I think we need to get a little bit more in tune with our lower body and get away from the chopstick legs a lot of times. I'm seeing too much of that. And losing some of that mobility, by getting straight-legged too much. And I believe that the more we do it and the more we learn about other arts and incorporate it, I think you can put in just about anything you want. I like, manipulation of the joints. I like punching, kicking. I like combining it all together. And the biggest thing is letting your own self-expression come out from what we were taught and not being bound by the book stating it has to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be any way you want it. And the biggest thing is, for teaching purposes, keep it the same, keep it right for a point of reference. After that, let them free flow. Let their own self-expression come out.
I'm going to go to Lee right now. Lee, use a term called breaking the waist. Breaking the waist. How does that relate to what Marty just said?
Well, this is one of the overarching terms. I mean, the job here is, when somebody comes at you, you have to defend yourself. You need to break their structure and maintain your structure. And structure changes from second to second depending on stances. We know that you don't stand in a stance, you transition through stances. Definition of a stance is a frozen transition. Somebody took a picture of it, but you move through them. And so breaking the waist means that in every single technique, as we do something to break their structure, we kick them in the groin, or we threaten to kick them in the groin, and they pull their hips back, the shoulders come forward. It's hard to generate force when your hips and shoulders are not aligned properly. Okay, and you can break the waist front, back, right, and left. And you'll look at the angles of cancellation. That's what Mr. Parker's talking about. So this is just, I think it's an easier term for the person, particularly the new student, to get when we just say break his waist.
You also use a term called the lower spinal rotation. Is it the same, or is that completely different?
No, lower spinal rotation is it's an anatomical term that I came across in Tai Chi because during the push hands drills, you'll find that it's harder to rotate to one side than it is to the other from a given position. And that there actually is 3 degrees more rotation in the spine going to the right and right-handed people than to the left. It's just the way that we're built. And it's one of those trivial little things that just most people just don't need to know, probably don't want to know, and it won't make a whole lot of difference in their lives.
Well, I want to know, so I'm going to go to Todd on this.
What, about 3 degrees of rotation in your hip, right hand? I'm left-handed. I don't know.
See, you're all turned around.
So one of the interesting things that, kind of coupled with what Mr. Wedlake was saying there, it's funny because you can affect people by removing expected resistance. And this is taught in the Kenpo system. For example, when, somebody's coming in for a low push or a two-handed push and you drop back with a hooking wings or something like that, or snaking talons, where they're expecting that resistance of your body weight to push, and it brings them forward and into you, kind of like a bait, I guess some people may say. But I mean, the rotation thing, yeah, I've never heard that before. That was interesting.
Marty, your thoughts?
Oh, it was interesting to me too. I'm right-handed, so I guess I get that.
You get the extra 3 degrees, pal.
I'm 3 degrees the other way.
Thank you for that, Mr. Wedlake.
So actually, he's behind us by 6.
It's trivia, man. It's just
one thing I do want to mention, and Mr. Wedlake touched on it. When we look at things, we don't consider and take it into our mindset the dissolve when we're doing things. And there was this top gun shooter. His name was Brian Enos. And he had a lot of the same philosophies like a Bruce Lee would have. And I really like some of his theories. He says so many people would say, hey, this is the truth of the technique. Well, in fact, the truth is what happens in that instant, in that moment. After that, it becomes history. And I think we have to constantly be looking for the new truth that's coming. And that's not to get hung up on something and be able to do, like Mr. Wedlake said, be able to adapt, to dissolve, to let it flow through. And I think we're missing that a lot of times. We talk about it, but I think that it needs to be implemented a lot more to raise our success ratio up, when we start getting the students into the technique lines and keeping them from punching sideways and turning their head, keep them in the game, which is probably all of our wishes, to the max.
Lee, you brought up a couple other points in your writing, which I read earlier today, talking about agility and balance. Do you want to address those issues?
Well, this is an athletic endeavor, so you've got to have, you want to develop the agility if you haven't got it already. And there are people that are physically slower than others. And, from watching pro football teams work out, that they have all sorts of drills to help with agility. Those quick cuts from side to side that football players do. Tennis players have to cross that court rapidly, and so do karate players. So you've got to have that agility, but a lot of this comes from the coordination drills that we do and the awareness of proprioception, which was mentioned by one of the other instructors earlier in this session, which is getting a sense of where your weight is, whether it's on your feet or if you're on the ground or on your side or if it's on your hands. And that's all sending signals to the brain that says you need to move like this in order to get your levers in line so you can stand up or you can move or you can punch correctly. So all of this stuff is tied in together. And the right-left coordination, of course, is something that we develop by working techniques on both sides, working coordination set, just, plain old doing drills to the right and the left. And instructors need to be aware of such things like, well, we know that we have right-handed people, and we know that we have left-handed people. We know that we have some people that can do things equally with both sides. And we also need to know that there is a set of people, it's kind of rare, that it's called ambisinister. They can't do anything with the other side. And that can transfer down into their feet. And if they can use both feet equally, most of us prefer to kick. If we're right-handed, we like to kick with our right legs. I don't want to kick with my left. Well, if you can, then you're called ambipedal. So you look at these combinations of things, and this is when you get to know a student, you go, that guy is left-handed, so he's got to work on this. The right-handed guy needs to work on that. And it's not just for your body because it works for your brain. You've taught people how to do short form one on the left side, and the first thing they do is complain. It's hard. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard. That's why you need to do it.
Really?
I do it in reverse.
For your mind.
We have people that, adapt. For those of you that know Bill Wallace, the injury resulted, so therefore he had to rethink how he would fight and the use of a left leg in his fighting. And we also have practitioners in Kenpo that spend a lot of time on speed and the eye-hand coordination. Obviously, when I tested, one of them was there. And now they are I think they have a background in quick draw gun shooting. Am I correct on that, Lee? There's a lot of people that do that. Is that effective, though? Is it truly effective to be able to just go lickety split like that person?
This goes back to what Mr. Zaninovich was saying about, what the truth for one person is different than the truth for another person. And it changes from moment to moment. So what that person can do, he's like Bill Wallace. Those guys are wired differently. And I fought Bill, and we used to hang out together. And I told him, Bill, you're a freak. Because people most people can't do what you do. That's what makes him outstanding. And Ed Parker was like that too. It's like people want to be Ed Parker. It's like, you can't be Ed Parker.
So